Hello and welcome to today's video showing you once more how to get to the top grades. So most teachers don't have a lot of time to teach the context of Shakespeare's life when they're teaching a play. So here is Shakespeare. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what this video is going to be about. This is Anne Hathaway, his wife. We're going to find out some very brief details of the marriage and then apply that to Macbeth and to Lady Macbeth, and then I'm going to show you 3 paragraphs I've written, one about the Patriarchal Society, the other one asking whether Lady Macbeth is based on Queen Elizabeth, and then a final one asking whether Shakespeare sees his wife Anne as like Lady Macbeth. So all those aspects of context are going to help you get the top grades. So if you're still with me, well done, congratulations, because you will be able to get the top grades at the end of this video. So this is the Chandos portrait, the only known likeness of Shakespeare. I'm telling you that just because it's fun to know. And this is the only known likeness of Anne Hathaway. And I say known with both of these, it's our best guess. We're not absolutely sure. Now we get to the really crucial bit. So Shakespeare got married at 18 years old, and that was extraordinary then, just like it is now. And Anne Hathaway was 26, which is even more extraordinary then than it is now. 26 was considered halfway through your life. Life expectancy, if you survived childhood, was into your 50s probably, and Shakespeare himself died in his early 50s. So you can see what a strange relationship this must have been. And then we have this fascinating detail that their daughter Susanna was born 6 months after the marriage, and therefore Anne Hathaway must have been pregnant when Shakespeare married her, and we assume that may be part of the reason that they married. Okay, well, what does this have to do with Macbeth, Mr. Salles? Here we go, let's find out. First, we need to analyse the character of Lady Macbeth. When Shakespeare creates her, does he create her as a patriarchal victim? So you need to know that a patriarchy is the name for any society controlled by men. And so if she's a patriarchal victim, that means she's the victim of a society which is controlled by men. Well, we can see that that's probably true. We can certainly read the play to suggest that she really desires power, but the only way to get power is through marrying Macbeth, and then to gain more power she has to persuade Macbeth to get more power himself. She can't do anything in her own right. And when she actually tries to do something, kill Duncan, she finds that she doesn't have the power to do it because she's overcome with empathy. Duncan reminds her of her father, and she simply can't kill him. Well, her father then becomes a symbol of the Patriarchal Society. It's a society controlled by men, women are controlled by their fathers, and she can't overcome that. Well, if we go to Shakespeare's marriage, he's showing something perhaps slightly different. Anne Hathaway presumably is doing something of which her parents wouldn't approve. She's getting pregnant before she's got married, and she's marrying William Shakespeare, who's possibly not in any condition when he marries her to look after her and provide for her. He's not really a mature enough adult to have built up any kind of property or income. Nevertheless, she takes the decision that she will marry him. So we can look at Shakespeare's marriage as proof that he was opposed to the Patriarchal Society, and he therefore created Lady Macbeth in order to show that the Patriarchal Society was wrong. And her tragedy, Lady Macbeth's tragedy, is that she can't escape that. Okay, so you've already learnt enough to make a grade 9, grade 8 link to context in any essay about Macbeth or Lady Macbeth. Next, we can start looking at Lady Macbeth as a powerful and intelligent woman. We can see her intelligence in the way that she knows exactly what to say to Macbeth to persuade him to kill Duncan. So without going through all the arguments, she plays on his fear of being seen as a coward. She plays on his grief at the loss of their newborn baby and uses that against him. And she also uses his love for her against him as well. She asks him to prove his love. Well, what might that have to do with Shakespeare's marriage? Well, again, we can see her as possibly highly intelligent and manipulating Shakespeare, perhaps. What 18-year-old would choose to marry a 26-year-old woman? Well, perhaps one who had got her pregnant and didn't see another way out. So we could interpret the marriage as a sign that he's being manipulated by her. We could, if we wanted to, go a step further and ask whether she got pregnant on purpose. Presumably, as a 26-year-old, she's been sexually active in the past and not got pregnant. And so we might ask ourselves, was this a deliberate act to trap the young William Shakespeare? Well, if we take that interpretation of the marriage, yes, she's powerful and intelligent, but not somebody that we're supposed to like. Now, the other presentation of Lady Macbeth is a symbolic one, where she represents all women as the daughters of Eve. So you need to know the story of the Garden of Eden here, and how it's Eve who is persuaded by the serpent to first taste the fruit from the tree of knowledge and of knowledge and good and evil. Now, that is termed the original sin, the sin that we're all born with because Adam and Eve committed it. But in Christian teaching and belief, Eve was seen as much worse than Adam because she was the one who first gave in to temptation, and then she corrupted Adam. And you can see this image is played out in Macbeth, where you can read it as Lady Macbeth corrupting her husband, making him do what he desires, but which his conscience would otherwise stop him doing. So now you have 3 points that you can write in an essay about Macbeth or Lady Macbeth, linked to context, guaranteed to bring that part of your answer up to grade 8 or beyond. Okay, now I'm going to give you part of that again, but with the writing. If this kind of element of the video where I give you writing so that you can take notes helps, please let me know in the comments down below. So now let's consider the subservient role of women in the patriarchal society of the day. Yes, women were considered the property of their husbands by law, but what did that mean in everyday life? Is it likely that the 17 or 18-year-old Shakespeare seduced Anne, or is it more likely that she took the initiative? And when we think this way, we can clearly see why he would write parts for clever, passionate, powerful women like Lady Macbeth. We might infer that he did not see women as weaker or inferior beings, but men's equal in many respects. Okay, so we can use the evidence from his life to suggest that he was in favour of women having equal rights to men. And that's why Macbeth writes to Lady Macbeth and calls her my dearest partner in greatness. Okay, let's look at an alternative viewpoint. Queen Elizabeth I as the role model for Lady Macbeth. And Anne herself would be an odd choice for a highly intelligent, articulate teenager to marry, unless she too were also quick-witted and able to keep up with his agile mind. So there's a possibility that she's close to his intellectual equal. Moreover, Shakespeare is born during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, a symbol of women's power and intelligence. And this actually became the cult of Queen Elizabeth, not just the Virgin Queen, but incredibly powerful and highly shrewd and intelligent. We can infer, if we choose, that Shakespeare's female leads are a celebration of their intelligence rather than a warning to husbands that they need to control their wives. So many in the audience would have seen the portrait of Lady Macbeth as proof that you can't give power to women because they're inherently evil and they're also inherently weak. That's why they would say Shakespeare makes her commit suicide to reveal her weakness. However, we can also argue that Lady Macbeth is not a sexist creation to prove that women are manipulative and evil. It's the Patriarchal Society that takes away that power for her to find power in her own right. And that's why she commits suicide. Macbeth refuses to treat her as an equal once he becomes king. And then finally, there's the interpretation that Anne, Shakespeare's wife, is manipulative and therefore Shakespeare is reworking her in some way when he creates Lady Macbeth. So on the other hand, if we believe that Shakespeare's marriage was forced on him, we might argue that Lady Macbeth represents the manipulation of his wife. How likely is it that a 26-year-old would get pregnant by accident? How desperate would she be for a baby and a husband in an age where women's status is determined entirely by who they marry? How desperate would she be to have a child when the average life expectancy was 35, because so many children died young? We might choose to see the trajectory of Macbeth's marriage starting as equal with my dearest partner in greatness to Macbeth's unemotional reaction to her suicide, she should have died hereafter, to mirror his own marriage. His resentment can be inferred from his will. I give unto my wife my second best bed with the furniture. And bearing in mind that Shakespeare died an incredibly rich man, he left virtually everything to his daughter and her husband. And this is the only reference to his wife in the will. You can actually historically argue either way whether this was typical of an Elizabethan will, or Jacobean will, I should say, or whether it suggests particular cruelty on Shakespeare's part. And of course, the wonderful thing about studying Shakespeare is that we don't know the answer. But what we can do is return to our original questions and ask whether we can side with one view or another. And because there are no actual answers, you've got a real freedom to use this for your interpretation of the play. So, if you are a new viewer of my channel, thank you very much for joining me. Please consider subscribing. And if you're an old viewer, you should get cracking on making notes from what I've just told you. Get revising. Try it in your own essay writing, because that's the only way to see if you've remembered it properly. And if you have any questions, pop them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching.